This is Anthony Pascal.
And this is Laurie Elster, and this is the All Access Star Trek Podcast, episode 150, I'd like to point out.
Wow.
So thank you for listening to all of these crazy episodes. Today, we are going to review Strange New Worlds, episode 208, called Under the Cloak of War. We've got a lot of news to go through first from San Diego Comic-Con. Something else that Tony got from San Diego Comic-Con was some kind of crazy cold and cough, so he does sound a little different.
Hello. Yes, well.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Laurie do most of the talking this week.
I'll do my best. I'm going to just start. Let's get right into it. With Star Trek Discovery, which we will see at the, early next year is when we're going to see it. But they did release a clip. They said it's the first 5 minutes of the first episode of season 5, which will be the final season. It was a very big action clip. The highlight of which was Captain Michael Burnham riding on top of a ship. Along with some guest stars, we got to see David Cronenberg on the bridge, some of the new people who are going to be there. We heard some, we saw some, but it was really mostly about action, which to me, I have to say, I know they do that with trailers. That's a trailer thing. It's not the thing I'm interested in about Star Trek Discovery.
I guess they just want to hit fans quickly. It's sort of in media res. You don't know what's going on. There's these new characters that they're conflicting with, that are stealing something, or they're all after something. And we know that this is this kind of galactic treasure hunt thing. We get a sense of the new Captain Raynor character, who's this Vulcan, but he seems different because it's future Vulcans who are different. But we never see him, but we hear him. And we get the Bonnie and Clyde of the 32nd century characters. We meet them. Saru is in command while Burnham is off being Iron Man in space.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense that the captain's the one on the dangerous mission, but in Star Trek, that always happens anyway. So, of course, he'd be in charge. And she seems, I have to say, I do love hearing her confidence, like the way she's just chatting away and saying all kinds of things and sort of having fun in this crazy adventure. But, I was really hoping for a glimpse of Tilly is what I wanted.
Yeah, she's noteworthy in that she's not on the bridge. We still don't know if and how, but she's been seen just kind of in uniform on the ship. So I think she's just going to be there in some way.
Yeah, I was just hoping for some more. I actually am more interested in our main characters than the guest stars. So I would have liked to have seen more of them, but I get it. Trailers have always been about just find some big action thing.
It's obvious they're spending a lot of money. I mean, the visual effects are spectacular. That opening sequence cost millions, so they're really trying to grab people with the spectacle of it. Or it's not really news. It's more the absence of news. They didn't announce a release date for Discovery. Not that we were expecting one. It's just still season 5 is still early 2024.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to the next thing, which is that we found out there was a panel basically to celebrate the 50th anniversary of animation in Star Trek. And they announced that there are going to be 5 new animated promotional spots with some familiar voices in them. They come from Casper Kelly, who produced one of the short treks, The Trouble with Edward. And they are, well, here's the fun part. So they're sort of in tribute to Lou Scheimer, who was one of the founders of Filmation, and they're done in Filmation style. Are all the spots done in that style?
Yes. And they go out of their way to make them look old, including like making, there's even little details like, when you would shoot animation and you would load the film on the reels, they would jiggle a tiny, tiny bit, and you have to recreate that digitally, so they are really trying to make them look old, as it were. They're scripted. Aaron Watke is writing them along with Casper Kelly, and I forget, there's another person involved, someone new. They're going to be fun and, in that style, but with a variety of characters across the franchise. So it's not just these 3. So it's not just Quark and Saru and Riker. There's going to be more.
Neelix, I think, is going to be in one. Although I don't think they said anything about Ethan Phillips specifically.
Yeah. So so it's fun. They're going to be short by definition. These aren't going to be canon. They're not like the short treks. They're going to be available online, like on StarTrek.com, maybe YouTube. So this isn't a new Paramount Plus thing. It's kind of just this extra thing. I think, and it's unclear when they're going to be released, but I think they're going to be released on Star Trek Day, which is September 8th.
I'd read
And
something they'd have physical copies at New York Comic Con where you could buy them, and then they'd be digital on the official site.
yeah, something like that. We're going to learn more in August. This was just the first announcement. They're going to be edgy, weird. Casper Kelly is known for doing weird things. He's a Adult Swim veteran. The thing he did for short treks is in The Trouble with Edward, there was that weird commercial for cereal commercial.
Yes, at the end.
Yeah, he made that. That was his contribution. So.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
Anyway, more on that later, but I'm excited about this project, even though we don't know a lot about it yet.
It looks fun and creative and playful, which I enjoy.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our next topic, which is Lower Decks. So we do have a premiere date. Season 4 is going to premiere on September 7th, with 2 episodes coming on the same day. There is sort of an overarching story about an unknown force destroying starships and threatening galactic peace. But they gave us a trailer, and the trailer is packed full of so many different fun scenes, along with an announcer who's emulating Ernie Anderson, who used to do those early teasers for The Next Generation, which is like next on Star Trek. So they're definitely having a lot of fun with it. I know your voice is shot, but what did you think of the trailer?
It's more Lower Decks. It's exactly what we expect from the show. It just shows funny moments, very rapid fire. I think this overall story really isn't that overall, and probably, maybe little bits here and there. Because the joke is that even though there's this big new threat, the Cerritos really isn't tasked to deal with it. But, eventually they're going to run into it. You could see certain moments we knew were coming. They're visiting Orion, and Mariner gets stabbed at a bar, but it's all part of the ambiance. They visit Ferenginar, and there's like this weird thing where Tendi and Rutherford are at what looks like a romantic hotel, being paired up, but they seem uncomfortable, like it's a mistake.
Yeah, they don't look like they chose that. There's great. I mean, my 2 favorite moments that I saw were, I think it was Ransom and Shax doing the Bev and and Deanna exercise routine, very 80s. And then, of course, I love a good Alan Moraine moment.
Yeah, that's in there. Yeah, I mean, there's just, there's tons of Easter eggs and stuff. That for legacy stars, it looks like Grand Nagus Rom and Lita will be back. We're going to see the USS Voyager Museum. Looks like Mariner and Boimler visit it, and one of those macrocosm creatures gets loose.
Of course it does.
Of course.
I mean, and there are also promotions on the horizon, it looks like. So, Ransom talks to Boimler about promotions. There's a moment where Tendi says, we'll be friends no matter what our ranks are. So, obviously, some changes are afoot. The poster came out, and it looks like it's emulating the poster for Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. And that's their tradition that they do that. And you guys did a great trailer analysis on the site. So if people want to dig into the not quite frame by frame, but many frames analysis, that's where you go. And then to celebrate Lower Decks on Star Trek Day, they're actually going to have cinema screenings. I'm going to guess it's those first 2 episodes that they're premiering with. It'll be on Star Trek Day.
This is part of the animation celebration, so I think they're also going to show the shorts on the same day, and maybe, I don't know, because if you think about how long a screening should be, 2 episodes of Lower Decks adds up to essentially 1 episode of a regular show,
right?
And usually when they do those, like with Picard, they do 2 episodes, so there's going to be more to it. They didn't really have much more detail about this. This was just announced during the panel. We'll be learning more hopefully soon.
Definitely going to go to those. That sounds really fun. There's something about Lower Decks with other people because I watched so much of it alone. And when I had a friend over one night and we were watching just one after another and laughing our asses off, it was an even better experience. And I already like watching it alone. So I think if you can get to those screenings, you should go.
Unlike the Picard screenings, which were a little last minute and very limited, this looks to be wider, including international screenings.
I'm also assuming when you get a ticket, you really have a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
was part of the Picard screening problem. A little more Lower Decks news, which is that there's an interactive novel called Warp Your Own Way. It's like a choose your own adventure graphic novel coming out in the fall of 2024. And there's some new statues of the characters coming. Mariner and Boimler with like detachable parts, different things, and Badgie ornaments with the two faces of Badgie.
Yeah, it was a good year for Lower Decks at Comic-Con. That IDW's making the interactive novel, and Ryan North, who did their first comic book with Lower Decks, is back for that. And it just sounds crazy. Stuff that there's some other things, there's the crew handbook coming in September, and there's also this, if you like the Star Trek Adventures game, there's a new Lower Decks tie-in so that you could play a Lower Decks character on that role-playing game. So it's it's a good year for Lower Decks.
Yeah. All right. Well, in other animated Star Trek news, we have a little bit of Star Trek Prodigy information, which is that you can now finally get all 20 episodes of season 1 digitally. They've previously you couldn't get 11 through 20. There's DVD and Blu-ray coming out September 26th, which is available for pre-order. We have a list of all the special features and extras that are coming with that on the site. And there was a great bit of it's not news, but it's just a reason to feel maybe upbeat about the future of Prodigy, which is that John Van Citters, he's the vice president of Star Trek brand development, and he's been with the franchise for decades. You could not ask for a better Star Trek advocate. And he was at Comic-Con and he said, yes, they're finishing up season 2. He said they're working very, very hard to find a new home for it, and they believe that they will. He said, I can't see how this is going to be the end, is apparently the sentiment he wanted to convey.
It was nice how he started the animation panel saying, before we talk about anything else, we should talk about Prodigy. So they weren't, he called it the 800-pound rock talk in the room, that, it wasn't on Paramount Plus. But he seemed very positive that things were moving forward. We still don't know where or when or how. I suspect we're not going to see Prodigy land anywhere until next year, but everyone needs content now.
I was going to say, now's the time, because things are going to start running out soon enough. And the petition that people have been signing to save the show has now over 30,000 signatures and still going strong.
Wild.
And there's also a new Prodigy book, a YA book coming out August 1st called Escape Route by Cassandra Rose Clark.
And Van Sitter said there's still other product development, the tie-in stuff happening in the background. So, and he said Prodigy's still part of the canon. It's still part of Star Trek. I mean, because there was another thing, during Comic-Con, they released this nice new promotional thing called The Home of Star Trek. And it was just a well-made promo that wove together moments from the franchise, the whole franchise, including the movies for Paramount Plus. But many people noticed that Prodigy wasn't in it. But I liked the promo, and I think it's good that the movies, the way they're promoting the movies, shows that maybe they're not going to keep on licensing the movies anymore. And now that they're all back on Paramount, all 13 of them are on Paramount Plus. But they can no longer say, every series, every episode, which they used to say.
Briefly.
But it is the home of Star Trek. There's over 850 episodes. Yes, 20 episodes aren't there, but there's still a lot of Star Trek content on Paramount Plus, with more to come, obviously.
Right, and that content isn't in other places here in America.
And once Prodigy finds a home, everything will be fine. I'm betting it's going to show up on either Netflix or Prime. I'm not saying I have inside knowledge. It's just, I'm just guessing.
And in my fantasy, they then decide to commission even more episodes because it's so successful.
Totally possible.
I want it. It's going to happen. Let's talk about Strange New Worlds. Now, before we get into new Strange New Worlds, there was a very fun Ready Room interview with Jonathan Frakes, Tony Newsom, and Jack Quaid about the crossover episode. That's worth watching. They talk about the scenes that were improvised in the crossover. So if you want to go get your fill of how that was made and put together, that's the place to do it. And during that interview, Tawny talked about how she ended up joining the writer's room for Starfleet Academy, which of course is on, like every other TV production, not doing anything right now. But she said it was all Alex Kurtzman. He said she was improvising and acting, and he noticed that, and he asked her to send him some of her writing after he saw the crossover, and then invited her to join the writer's room, which is a truly rare thing in this business.
Yeah, and it's good news having her in that writer's room. She's a huge fan. She has a great voice. You know, I suspect that show will be a lighter show, not a comedy show per se. You know, there was no discussion of that show at Comic-Con. I mean, this interview was recorded well before the strikes, obviously. The big news from Comic-Con itself, yeah, after the surprise drop of the crossover episode. But if you hopefully loyal listeners got our rapid response podcast on Sunday, because they released the crossover episode on Saturday along with showing it to the crowd at Comic-Con, which was a lot of fun watching it with all those people. As you said, it's a different experience seeing it with the crowd, and they loved it.
Yeah, people must have been howling.
Oh yeah, you know, there's so many inside jokes, and yeah, it was great. But the big news besides that was they finally confirmed the thing that we've been saying is happening, which is episode 9 is a musical episode called
Subspace Rhapsody.
They released a poster for it.
I love the poster, by the way. I think it's beautiful.
It looks like a poster from like a old musical.
Yes, and I love old musicals. So, yeah, they did a teaser trailer and a poster. They said they're going to be 10 original songs, plus a special Subspace Rhapsody version of the main title. So before we get into what we thought of the trailer, so since we did get that extra episode over the weekend, the whole schedule is moved up. So that musical episode is now coming next week, and then the season finale will come the week after that on August 10th.
Which is why this week we're reviewing episode 8 when we should be reviewing episode 7, but we got that early.
So what were your thoughts on so we've had 2 things now since then. So we had the teaser trailer at San Diego Comic-Con, and then the Ready Room this week had a clip that sort of shows how the singing gets going.
Right.
In the episode.
We know they've wanted to do a musical episode, but they had to come up with a sci-fi reason why everyone is singing and
dancing.
Yeah. So, you know, apparently they're trying to get some subspace fold to use it as a form of rapid communication. And Pelia suggests they try harmonics. And so Celia Rose Gooding in the clip chooses the Great American Songbook, which are basically old, you know, musical jazz standards and classics. And we don't see what happens next, but in the trailer you get the sense that somehow the subspace fold reacts to the music and explodes with song and turns everyone up. Yeah, that happens.
That's how it works. That's how it works.
That's science people.
Well, and the song is Anything Goes, which is a great song. There are a million fantastic versions of it. But I made my 15-year-old watch the teaser trailer because she likes musicals, but she doesn't like Star Trek. And she said, "It's insane," with a very happy tone. So I take that as a good sign. I mean, I am excited for this musical episode. Especially, I love old school musicals. So I feel like they're obviously indicating that that's the tone that they're interested in with the music. So we'll see. But I just think it's going to be wacky and fun, and I'm in.
I'm going to watch it. And I'm going to keep an open mind. How about
Look,
that?
you got your war story this week. I get my musical next week.
Okay, there we go. I guess that's kind of the point of the show, right? They're trying to give,
Yeah.
it's a variety pack. And, if you don't like caramel, you can go for the hazelnuts or whatever.
Although you should like caramel because it's delicious. I mean, the one thing I'll say is that I do feel like the Discovery cast, to me, earned the musical episode. Like, I feel a bit bad that they didn't get to have one because I feel like they're always, besides being famous for always singing on set, and some of them coming from musicals, and they did, carpool karaoke and all these things. I feel like their interest in it is what made this possible.
100% agree. They're the ones who talked about it the most. Although, doing a musical episode,
I know it doesn't fit.
the problem is that show's highly serialized. To just take a break from we're searching for this thing and we've got this ongoing story, but for this week we're singing and dancing. It's clear they decided the place to do it is the place where we could do different things every week.
I agree with that. And I also, was there unlimited budget, which of course there never is, I would have done just a special extra, not part of the season episode of Discovery. I mean, if I could just plan it out the way I would have done it. I feel like they earned it. But that said, I think these guys are going to have a lot of fun with it.
I mean, if you went crazy, right, you'd turned it also into crossover. So, when they try to communicate through the subspace fold, somehow like Anthony Rapp comes through the fold from the 32nd century, and he gets to do a little singing, dancing, and maybe Wilson or, you bring a couple of them along and then they go back at the end.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's going to happen.
No, it's not, unfortunately.
So there was Strange New Worlds news. We weren't sure there would be news because it's not, you can't talk about. I mean, the weird thing about the panel was there was no panel, right? So they had blocked out 90 minutes to cover 3 shows, and instead of canceling it, they had Scott Mantz, our friend Scott Mantz, comes out. No one else. So he wasn't the moderator. He was the panel. There were no.
Yeah, that's what he's been saying on social. He's like, I was the panel.
And he came out, he talked about how he's been a fan forever. And yeah, and then he just started rattling things off. He's like, here's a trailer, here's a trailer, here's a trailer. And then here's the Lower Decks episodes, crossover episode. And I don't know how many people are surprised that the musical episode is coming. You and I were just like, okay, finally you'd admit it. But we knew this was coming.
No, but there are a lot of people who just watch the show and they don't track it and read news and listen to podcasts. Weirdly, they don't listen to us. I don't know what that's about, but they don't know. And so for them, it's look, some of them still don't know.
Yeah, I saw a lot of headlines across.
Where are they in for a shock?
Yeah. There's a lot of headlines across the globe about Star Trek is doing a musical episode. It got people's notice. It was probably the biggest thing out of Comic-Con, really, from Star Trek.
That makes sense.
You'd see this in the mainstream media because it's like, wow, not a lot of people do musical episodes.
I do think it would be fun. I'm just trying to imagine like the viewer who doesn't. I mean, there were shows I've watched many times where I wasn't following news to see what was happening in them, that you sit down to watch an episode of Strange New Worlds and suddenly, boom, everybody starts singing.
I'm curious how far in they go. Like, when does the singing and dancing start? I think it has to start early on. I think that clip is probably most of the opening teaser.
Right. Because the theme is different. So the change should have happened before the opening theme starts.
Right. Which means after that, you got 40 minutes of singing. Well, we don't know how much they bookend at the end because obviously at some point they're cured of the singing somehow.
Right.
Do we see Spock in the trailer? Like, is someone immune to the singing and dancing on the ship?
That's a funny idea. I don't know. I mean, we know we don't hear Anson, but we see him.
I think he's
we see him dancing. We see him as part of a big thing. We know they have a couple of singers in the cast. I mean, Celia, of course.
Yeah.
Christina Chong also, because she has an album out now. So we'll see. I guess we'll see if somebody's immune or not.
How does it stop? Someone has to do a thingy to make it stop.
Well, you can sing and do a thingy.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know the logic of it. I'm assuming there is some kind of logic, and we'll just have to live with it.
Yes. You say live with it. I say dance with it.
Okay, there we go. By the way, Strange New Worlds continues to perform well for Paramount Plus. It helped propel the service into this new chart for Nielsen. I won't get into the details, but the point is it's getting a lot of views. Star Trek continues to be important for Paramount Plus. As a side note for ratings things, on IMDb, IMDb, every episode is rated by readers of IMDb. The Lower Decks crossover episode is ranked at like a 9.3, which puts it in the top 10, maybe even the top 5 Star Trek episodes of all time.
Wow.
Currently, it was good. It was not that good.
Well,
it ranks above City on the Edge of Forever, is my point.
But I mean, it is also about for me, there's a reason I don't rank things. And it's because there's things I just wouldn't put in the same category. Like if you said, what's the most joyful minute for minute, entertaining grin on your face episode of Star Trek, then that would be up at the top. But I mean, also to IMDb, I don't care that much about IMDb rankings. But I think the main takeaway is just that people really, really loved it. And I've seen some people criticizing it and saying like it wasn't about anything, which I actually don't agree with, or that it was too silly for them. I mean, if it's too silly for you, it's too silly for you. But I found I'm going to be watching it over and over and over and over again.
Extremely rewatchable. I've watched it maybe 4 times.
Yeah. And a lot of people are out there doing that. So now with all of that news covered, and boy, there was a lot of it, I want to get into a review of Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 8, Under the Cloak of War. Tony, you've been saying for a long time that you've been looking for something where they talk about the aftermath of the Klingon War. And this really was the episode where they did that. I have a lot of thoughts about this episode. Why don't you start with your overview?
I think it's a really strong episode because it's very serious and it takes those things head on in a way that ironically Discovery never did, even though it introduced the war. They even used moments of Discovery in the previously on segment.
Yep.
But this actually, the flashbacks took us to the war we never saw in Discovery, really. But because Strange New World Season 2 is so focused on character and emotion, it was all really a M'Benga Chapel emotional story, very dark. So I liked it for that. I like war movies and that kind of stuff, and this is one of those episodes that lives in the gray areas. It's thought-provoking, it's challenging. I think some fans are finding it maybe too challenging. It's going to provoke debates, 2VIX level debates for quite a while about morality and M'Benga as a character and Chapel and their actions both in the past and in the present on the Enterprise. And we'll get into all of that, but I very much liked it. And I have some issues, which I guess we always do usually, but overall, the hard thing for this episode, I think, is it's sandwiched in between 2 very light episodes, and which is why you really shouldn't. I always say you should binge watch Discovery. It gets better when you binge watch it. This show, bad binge watch show, because you could not handle this kind of tonal shift. It would look ridiculous to watch the Lower Decks crossover, this and a musical in one sitting. It would make no sense. But I think it does make sense when you just watch it on its own. Anyway, I'm talking too much, and I shouldn't be hurting my throat, right? So you say something.
I know. I was just literally waiting for you to stop so that I could. So my overview, I thought it was very ambitious, which I admire. And I thought it was complicated. And I think that it took seeds, like it was very, very carefully thought out. They had been planting some of the seeds for this since season 1. I'm not sure what the message was, which maybe we'll figure out by the time this podcast is done. I think it was probably more about raising questions than answering them, which is a good Star Trek thing to do. The reason for me it was better on the second viewing is because, sometimes when there's a twist, something happens at the end, you go back and it's fun to watch everything again now that you know. And in this episode, I felt like it was almost essential to know. Like, it really gave so much more impact to the things that happened when you knew the whole story. But I didn't love this episode. I don't want to be nitpicky, so I think that the best way to look at this episode is I sort of was looking at what worked and what didn't, and I'd like to start with what did work.
So what worked for you then?
So the big things that worked for me were, first of all, I would say almost all, but not all, the performances. Our main cast, particularly like M'Benga and Chapel, to me were standouts. I thought they were incredible. I thought they did there was something very visceral about this episode because there was so much of what was happening was reflected in the physicality of what was going on in the scenes. Like the way war vets can feel very different from the people around them and feel very misunderstood. And I felt like often when those conversations were happening, especially the one on the bridge with Uhura and Ortegas, there was such there is physical distance between them because the bridge is gigantic, which I think Boimler made a joke about in the other one. But they were far, far apart trying to have this conversation and then trying to come together and sort of going apart. And I think it did a nice job of showing that there is that dividing line between people who've been in a war, truly experienced it, and those who didn't. And I think the same sort of visceral feeling was there with Chapel. Her introduction when she arrives and is thrown into the thick of everything and wounded are arriving and she's now the head nurse. It was, you got the brutality instantly. They did not need to waste any time building up to it. It was just there. It was very MASH. It had a very MASH vibe and some of that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. They made sure that the organ replicator wasn't working, so they were basically doing it the old-fashioned way, which is old-fashioned surgery, heart massaging.
Meatball surgery, as Hawkeye Pierce used to call it.
Yeah. The performances certainly, when I talked to Jess Bush at the beginning of the season, she talked about this episode without saying what it was, but talking about how vulnerable she and Babs were. And it's her favorite of the season because of the emotion. And she gave a lot of credit to Jeff Bird, who's the director, to draw out those emotions from them because they were so vulnerable in this episode. Actually, especially Babs, the panic attacks he was having.
And the way they filmed those again, you could feel it. You felt those panic attacks because the way that it was the performance and the way that it was shot.
Yeah, because again, they're smartly carrying stories on. So last week we had the kind of quick check-in with Spock and Chapel. This week they carried that story on where Spock is kind of flailing. He sees that she's in distress, but he doesn't know what to do, and he defaults to being Vulcan. And she's like, "You can't analyze it. This isn't a statistic." And I'm not sure if they've broken up, but they broke up for this episode because, and that's what PTSD does. It destroys lives and destroys families. And you got a little glimpse of that just in their relationship.
But the other scene with them, I agree with you on that one. The other scene with them, which was at Pike's when they're having dinner, we're jumping around as we always do. There was, and back to physicality and sort of the staging, like everybody's talking to each other. Chapel and Spock are off to the side. He sees she's upset, and what he does, which I thought was really well done, is instead of looking at her, he moves so that he's standing next to her and he's seeing what she's seeing. And that's when he notices she's upset. There's a situation going on that's upsetting her, and he, being Spock, decides to go do something about it and change it. But I loved that turning where he's like, I need to see what she's seeing to see why she's upset. That was before they had the other conversation.
Yeah, this divide on the ship is interesting. Yeah, and we learned about this on Discovery that Pike and Spock and Una were off doing their own thing under orders during the war. And they did not experience the war. And in fact, he said most of the current crew weren't part of it. But and then Uhura, this is before she was even on board the ship. And then you had Ortegas and Chapel and Mbanga representing the other side. But you could tell other people on the crew. They never told us where La'an was. It's unclear whether she's a war vet or not, actually.
I mean, she's been through her own horror,
Right.
but yes, she was off being, with the Gorn or something.
I think that predated this. But the way she is, she's seen some shit. But yeah, there was a lot of that talk of like people don't get it, and I really liked Melissa Navia in this episode. She was kind of the loose cannon, the way she reacted to Ra on board this ship. It's all because this Klingon ambassador, or Federation ambassador, is a Klingon defector, comes on board, disrupts the ship. He just kind of tears the ship apart. He starts a civil war essentially on the ship, because this is where the thing, and I know you're going to get to this, so I'll just jump to. So the way they forced the situation is they had it so that the Federation ordered Klingon war veterans to be nice to the Klingon ambassador. I guess the nicest way you could put that, besides just kind of creating the conflict, is that the Federation is still this idealistic organization even after the war, especially the diplomatic corps, and they want to believe that Ra is a true believer, and it's important to them for him to fit in and be accepted. And so they're literally ordering people to have dinner with him. Some people can deal with that. Some people like it. Uhura is just almost, she's starstruck by this guy. I thought that was really interesting to see her reaction to this guy. She admires him, and, because he is kind of this powerful,
well, he's negotiated
guy.
all these things, and he's gone against the grain of what he's supposed to be. I mean, I like your take on it, that you're trying to see it as idealism, and that's why they do it. But it is, we know what PTSD is now. And so I think that the idea that they would be so oblivious to caring for their own personnel in that situation, just to me seemed unrealistic. Seemed like insensitive. It seemed psychologically unhealthy. It seemed to be putting the burden on the wrong people, just so that they could say, oh, look, they said we had problems with him getting along with people before, so now we want this to happen. It was a bad decision. And I think what would have helped me was if there'd been a whole scene where Pike was getting, we're so used to like some bad world comes along and gives orders, and then our captain has to do them in old school Trek. And so I think had Pike been given these orders, fought for his people and lost, but seemed to be on their side, it would have helped. And instead he seemed himself, despite a few moments here and there where he checked in, he seemed overall kind of oblivious to the seriousness of what they were all going through.
Well, Pike wants to believe in his crew, but he also wants to believe in the ideals of the Federation and diplomacy. We saw this in the season 1 finale and how he dealt with the Romulan situation incorrectly, because he was being overly diplomatic at a time when that wasn't the right move. Yeah, but I agree. There was it took Una was the one who had to figure out, we got to get this guy off the ship.
Yeah. And even when he first beamed in and said, I want a tour of the ship. First he comes in and he says some jokey thing, and Pike immediately is like, I'm right there with him. And then Una and La'an exchange glances when he says he wants a tour, because La'an's chief of security, so she should be suspicious of pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
And Pike is like, let's go. And I felt like they could have had Pike still have his idealism, still believe in it and fight for it, but also be more conscious of his crew. I mean, you don't have to be in a war to know that other people are affected by it. I've never been in a war, and I know that other people are.
They did keep you guessing, because at the beginning, Ortegas introduces the idea that this guy isn't actually even a defector. He's a spy. It's all an act.
Con, yeah.
They were keeping you guessing of like, what is this guy's motivation? Is he a genuine defector? Because he would say things like, "Oh, Klingons, they're blinded by their ideology." He really switched sides in every way. Or at least that's what he was putting out there. And you really had to wonder, like, what's real, what's not. And then there's this whole mythology about him, about the butcher of Jagal, which was actually a name given to him by the Klingons for killing his own men, was the mythology, which helped him get the Federation, ironically, to believe him, because if he killed his own men, then it explains why he defected.
So let's get into the tricky part, and I think this is where you and I are going to be on opposite sides, which is always fun. For me, I don't know if it was the writing, the acting, or that a combination thereof, but he did not work for me at all. And the reason that he didn't was because he came on, first of all, he kept reminding me of Tuvix. It's funny you mentioned Tuvix at the top of our discussion, because he did remind me of Tuvix, because he was too jovial. He was too quick to disparage Klingon ways. And to me, I instantly was suspicious. I was suspicious the entire time. I never bought that this guy was doing anything but putting on an act, because he was so over the top. Oh, I'm a silly Klingon things. Hi, let's make a joke. And I was like, I would never trust people like that. And nobody should trust people like that. There was something so, to me, phony about him, that it would have worked better for me had he been more Klingon in his behavior, like he had some weight, like he'd been through some shit and had come to this difficult place, this conclusion, and now he wanted to move forward with peace, and he knew he had an uphill battle to convince people of that. I didn't feel that from him at all.
I have spoken to the director of this. We'll be putting up that interview after this podcast comes out. And we talked about Robert Wisdom. I'm a big fan of his from The Wire and Barry and so many other things. And I was excited to see him play Klingon. And apparently, Wisdom played it as he was 100% genuine, in that he had switched sides and that he was a true believer in these things he was saying. He wasn't bullshitting. The bullshit was that he took on the lie of the Butcher of Jagal to sell himself to the Federation. And in a way that kind of reminds me in Next Generation how the myth of Worf's family had to be, that they were responsible for the massacre, even though it was the Duras family, but that the lie was so important that they kept that going, so because Klingons are all about myths and legends and lies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I liked that. I thought that even though he was acting un-Klingon, this whole idea of creating a mythology around himself was in a way very Klingon. I get what you're saying, but I don't agree.
Yeah.
I enjoyed his performance. I thought his makeup was a little weird. I think maybe
I'm sorry. I thought it was terrible.
I think maybe, it was easy to put on and off or something, because they didn't, it takes hours to do the full on Klingon. I did appreciate the other Klingons they showed us briefly. And of course it remember in season 2 of Discovery, they're like, well, we were bald during the war because we shave our heads.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, they didn't stick with that, thank God. There was a lot of Klingon lore, the Klingon knife and the Makbara, and they really relished and created some new lore. There's that book that's very much like The Art of War that they talked about. So they were they were relishing Klingon lore, adding to Klingon lore, because Klingons are so important to Star Trek. They were the original villains, stand in for the Russians in the Cold War, and we're back to Russians and war again, and so it's all topical. And who better than the Klingons to help them explore war stories? So I was happy, with all of that, actually.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed that part. And as someone who is watching it and not believing him the whole way along, I also was aware of oh, now he is being a bully. There were that moment at the dinner party when he grabbed Mabenga's arm, right? That to me was a really important moment for a whole bunch of reasons. One, it showed to me, oh, he's pushing his way through and he's a bully. And two, that and this was more in my second viewing, I feel like that was the turning point for Mbenga, who kept thinking, where he decided, oh, maybe this is a job I need to finish. The job
Yeah,
being his assignment to go, his decision to go take him out.
right, during the war itself.
Yes. And I feel like from that moment on, he was deciding, am I going to finish the mission that I started those a few years ago, as that caption said?
Yeah, that was weird, like, they couldn't just put a year on it, and I
I know.
guess that's all because Discovery and just how things are never add
Sure.
up, and they're like, "This happened in the past sometime." I thought the just getting back to the look of the war, I thought was great. I like how there's like no, why were they fighting over this planet? It was the ugliest,
I was
most
trying to figure.
useless planet.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and that's the thing. It doesn't matter. This was an insignificant rock in the middle of nowhere, and people were dying over it, which has been repeated
Well,
over and over in real world
I
wars.
was confused. Like, were they fighting over it, or was it because the hospital was there? Like, I didn't really understand the logistics of that part.
That they did a lot of subtle things when you look at the design of the base and how haphazard it was, and it was not very Starfleet-y Federation. Everything was dirtier, more military style, which would be the case during a war, obviously.
And Clint Howard was there.
Yeah, I mean, he was the grizzled old, guy who's had enough. It kind of took me out because I'm like, oh look, it's Clint Howard.
Yeah.
And you expect him to be funny. Yeah, I mean, it was a very small role. He was good playing it, but it still took me out a little bit. I think Clint Howard might be more fun in a lighter episode, but I don't want to pigeonhole him and say that's all you're allowed to do, Clint Howard.
Yeah.
You can't, you're not just here to service Tranya. So it was fine, but it did take me out a little bit to say, because he's just so Clint Howard, I
Yeah.
guess.
And in those scenes, even though, like, I love, like, Chapel's arrival, like I said, was great, and there were some moments that were really powerful and really strong, but there was also a lot of, like, tropey, war movie tropey things that just made everything, or certain parts of it, very predictable. You know, you knew who was going to die. You knew things that were going to be said, and that, I think it's hard maybe to do war scenes without those things, but they could have tried a little harder to avoid them.
Some people have said this would have worked better as a two-parter, and I may agree with that because yeah,
Yeah.
they really had to condense things. The journey of Inman, he was the one that they were massaging his heart, and then he was on the mend, and then Mbenga has to talk him back into the fight, and then suddenly he's going on a suicide mission, and Mbenga wants to talk him out of it. It happens very quickly over every time we jump back. These stories are evolving very rapidly. But I like the Trask character, the Andorian special ops guy, who wanted an edge. Now we know what the super serum was, and Mbenga developed it. It's called Protocol 12, and Starfleet had abandoned it. And so we're, when you watch this episode, they are paying things off they set up in episode 1.
Yeah.
Well, we saw the origin story of how, because there is a bond you saw in episode 1 between Mbenga and Chapel that now makes even more sense.
Mm-hmm.
We even learned how he learned the trick to store his daughter in the transporter buffer.
Yeah.
That was brutal. That moment when Christine realizes, there's wounded. I love the thing of transport incoming, that constant drone.
Yes. Yeah.
That was very MASH. It was like the sound of the helicopters in MASH, and it was just this brutal thing when she realized, like, oh, we've still got that guy in the buffer, and he just comes over.
He just does it.
But then he says, we save lives. That's what we do. He
No,
did
and
the math.
It's a huge moment because it also tells you that he understands that you have to do things that you don't want to do. Where she hesitates because she's new, he's like, this is what you have to do. It's the right thing, and it's terrible, and you just have to do it, which fits with later decisions that he makes.
When you look at Mbenga's arc as a larger arc, and and he talks about this in the episode of, he joined Starfleet to learn new ways to heal people. But we know that that's personal for him because he was hoping that through his travels through Starfleet, he would find a way to cure his daughter. And later he talks about how I didn't want it to change me, but he then accepts it has changed me.
In his conversation with that guy whose heart they'd squeezed, where he asks him, why did you join Starfleet? And the guy says, like, to explore and learn. And he said, none of the stuff I've been doing lately, which I thought was that part of the conversation I thought was very powerful, because what it must be like to join Starfleet and then find yourself in a war, which is, our whole reason that people join Starfleet, we know is for these optimistic, idealistic reasons. So I thought that was a powerful conversation that wasn't tropey in that way. It was a true conversation.
Yeah, I mean, if it reminded you of anything, it was the siege of AR 558 from DS9, which had similar sensibilities of these Starfleet people struggling at a forward base. I mean, war's always been a part of when you go to the original series, they were doing Vietnam War allegories.
Yeah.
And certainly through the 80s and Next Generation made Starfleet into something a bit perhaps too optimistic, too utopian, but whenever it comes down to it, Starfleet is the one that has to fight the bad guys.
Right. And I mean, Deep Space Nine decided to explore that because it hadn't been explored. Star Trek had always looked at those things from outside. Like, we've moved past that, but we know these things still exist in other places. And Deep Space Nine was like, what happens when you have to do it again?
Yeah.
And so I think this was trying to do that. And in that way, I thought all of those things primarily worked very well for me.
There's other echoes in this episode, not just the war stuff, but these kind of decisions and the gray area stuff that also reminds me of great episodes. Like in The Pale Moonlight, The Most Toys, I think is, did Data shoot or not? Is the way they shot that scene at the end, I think they want to leave it a little unclear.
Although the writer said he shot. She said he definitely. And so to me, the big difference there, because I was thinking about that episode, I think you'd mentioned it in your review, was that when he did it, it was because he recognized that it was the only way to stop more kidnapping and more killing. And so in this case, with M'Benga killing Ra, it was different because you didn't get the sense he thought he was preventing further death.
No, because, this guy
he would have kept up whatever, even if it was a charade, he would have kept it up.
But some things can't be forgiven. And this guy was a war criminal. And
Chapel said, make him pay. Like back when they were there, she said, make him pay. And I think that mission stayed with him from then on. I think the PTSD that he experienced immediately upon seeing him was partially his recognition that, like, this has come back. This question of, do I finish the job?
I mean, he kept the knife for a reason.
Yeah.
Although it came in real handy with the DNA tests later. That's for sure. When I was talking to the director, he said that they shot that many different ways, including without the opaque screen.
Oh, interesting.
And they gave it to the producers. He says, here, you guys choose how you want this to play out. But he did it where it was clear, like M'Benga's like, bam, you're dead.
Right.
And then the more kind of, how did it happen? And they went for that one, which does allow for more of the debate, more of the, is M'Benga a murderer debate, which is a fair debate. And I think the thing is, I think everyone kind of knows he is.
Yes.
La'an gave, she's like, well, the records match this. She wasn't saying she did,
No, she was saying the timeline is correct. Like, the series of events did take place. Like, the thing Chapel described fits the records.
Right. Chapel was clearly lying.
Yes.
And I think Pike and La'an knew. And that's why Pike went to sickbay. Pike knew that they were lying.
Yes.
But he couldn't say it. And M'Benga's like, look, you just, we're going to agree on a lot of things. We're friends, but you don't get it, Chris, and you never will.
No, and he really didn't get it. Like, when he comes in and asks them to go, and first he primarily asks M'Benga, and then he's like, oh, Chapel's here too. And I'm thinking, she was there too. Come on. And M'Benga's like, no, it'll be fine. And I just was thinking of, like, Arrested Development, like, narrator, it will not be fine. like that, because it really felt like you could just tell it was not fine. It was such a strange request.
I don't think any other episode of Star Trek really, though, has been this dark. But I applaud the show for being this serious and for taking on these issues head on. And, one of the knocks on the show is it's too light and it's never about anything. Well, this was about something, I feel, and it definitely wasn't too light. There were no jokes.
There was one moment one scene I didn't like that was trying to be light, but was really just a setup and a catalyst. Was like, Spock is learning to make Raktajino. And so they tried to do this like sort of silly thing, and he plays it off as, I'm interested in Klingon culture. It was all to get the guy to sickbay. Like, that whole scene existed only to get the guy to sickbay. I thought it was a weak scene. I thought it was a misuse of Spock. And just, I've been working on this. I thought that was a little goofy, if not light. But there was a scene that was, I thought, fantastic between Ortegas and M'Benga. This was maybe my favorite scene in the whole thing, although Chapel's stuff was phenomenal. But where they're standing outside, he finds Ortega standing outside Pike's. She doesn't want to go in. And he lightens it up, and he talks her into going in. And they talk about putting on a Starfleet face. And he says, it's a good face. Like, he's trying at that point. And her comment is like, the Butcher of Jagal is in there, and everyone's acting like he's the friggin' Dalai Lama. So it wasn't, I wouldn't call it light. There was nothing light about it. But it was a moment of connection. And I really loved the way that he spoke to her, and that he found a way to get them both in there, saying, like, let's just, pretend the war's not a problem for right now.
Yeah, and this also shows you the camaraderie of war vets. Mm-hmm. We've never seen these two characters interact in anything more than a cursory sickbay. I mean, I'm not sure they've really had a conversation before.
Yeah, I don't remember one.
But here they are, and they're joking around because they've seen some shit, and they have that bond immediately because of that. Even though, and I'm glad they didn't do this, Erica's got her own story from the war. She wasn't there, but she can still talk to, she's still accepted, I guess, by M'Benga and Chapel as, someone who understands, unlike Spock and Pike. Again, this is all ties well into the first episode, including Spock's Raktajino, because apparently he's now pals with that Klingon captain. They're sending letters to each other or whatever.
Exchanging recipes.
No, I was fine with that. Perhaps, I mean, this is more the technical thing. They basically have turned the old food synthesizers from the original series into full-on replicators, essentially.
Yep.
The only difference is they make the old-fashioned ding sound. But they've got, I mean, I'm guessing that the replicators in the bar can only make food. Right. So they're not full-on replicators.
Can't make a uniform and all those other things.
Well, but there's that machine that makes uniforms on Discovery. So they've pretty much, even though they don't really use it that much, they've essentially said, we've got replicator technology. Discovery also showed that they have hologram technology, but right. we don't have holodecks either. That's kind of a minor thing.
I did wonder why La'an was not at the dinner. I thought she should have been there as the chief of security. I would have her everywhere that Klingon was.
Yeah, I mean, that Klingon should have had his own security, obviously. He is a important diplomat, and there are issues surrounding him. But, that's one of the things of, you do that, and then does the episode make, can we do the things we want to do with the episode? And the answer is no. So he doesn't get his own security.
I don't know that he'd need his own security on a Federation starship, because the idea would be that they're not going to run up and do something. But she should have been there. She should have insisted on being there.
Yeah.
And I agree that it should have been a two-parter, because I think besides the choice of how he played the Klingon that didn't work for me and did work for you, I just think there are so many things that more information, some more story would have helped. And especially with developing him as a character to really because he didn't keep me guessing. And I think they could have kept us guessing if we'd had more and there wasn't time because they had to move to the next thing.
I liked the character a lot. I'm a World War II buff and a space buff, and I kept on thinking of Werner von Braun, who, built the V2 rockets for the Nazis,
Yeah.
and yet the Americans brought him over and he ran, our rocket program, and he was a celebrated American, and he did these specials for Disney. He wrote this book called I Aim for the Stars, but then there was the joke of people would say, yeah, Werner von Braun aims for the stars, but sometimes he hits London.
Right.
And a lot of people weren't cool with it, and so that paralleled here. But I think he was an interesting character, and I certainly bought the performance, but we're going over old ground here.
Yeah.
Again,
No, it's just different for each of us. So there were a few sort of nitpicky things that I just want to bring up, which is one, like, so he's stabbed and he's lying there, and they don't. I mean, I guess Chapel and Mbenga don't do anything because they don't want him to live. But I mean, that would have been the investigation for me if I were Pike, because I'm like, they've saved people from so many things, and he'd be like, nobody did. You didn't think to do anything? Like, it's just stabbed.
Yeah, because especially since he's a Klingon. Okay, so here's my headcanon. First of all, there's the Doktog knife, which has a specific design to kill Klingons. So I think the way he stabbed him, because he's a doctor,
right,
is he stabbed him. He got through both hearts. He knew just how to use that knife, and he used just how to get through both hearts.
Okay,
Klingon, if he's going to finish the job, he's going to finish the job.
And this is one of those times where I would have liked to have heard that. All they had to do was have a bit of, well, he didn't stand a chance because blah, blah, blah. Something. I mean, I'm glad it's your headcanon, but sometimes I want those things in.
Well, except that the whole point of this is for us to be questioning his motivation. And if you start getting into that, it starts answering the questions they want the audience to be asking, the more philosophical and moral questions about the character. So I know you usually like give us a little taste here so that something makes sense, but the ambiguity is part of the point. And so they get a pass on this one for me.
All right. That's fair. And I have a really funny nitpick that is about a line of dialogue that I don't think anybody thought about when the Andorian guy says he's ordering his men to kill on sight anyone who's not a Klingon soldier after they torture them.
Right.
And I wanted to be like, do you not know what kill on sight means?
I don't have an answer for that one. That was
just a mistake. That was a mistake, but I
think you've got the order of those off.
Yeah.
But that guy, you know what? He was all hopped up on, whatever drugs to give him an edge or something. He was a little. I mean, that guy was a bit unhinged.
I know. It was just that it was supposed to be this big scary thing, and then it was like, what? So it took me out of the moment because I was like, do you not understand what you just said?
So we learned a big thing about Mbenga through that guy, in that, we thought that Mbenga was a doctor during the war and he ended up having to fight because there was a war. And the way this now is presented is Mbenga was an ass-kicking, hand-to-hand combat, black ops guy, I guess, before he was a doctor, so there's still more to explore, from, 20-something Mbenga is, I guess, some, ninja character. Then he, I guess, went to med school and put all that behind him until this guy shows up and says, help us.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot more. Like it told us a lot, and it also asked more questions about him that would make it more interesting to find out about him.
Yeah.
I do. I think the only thing it did, like, they established at the beginning of the show that Pike and Mbenga had a closeness and a history. And I felt like in this one, they tried to do it a couple times just by having Mbenga call him Chris. But it was Pike's disconnection from what was really going on that got in the way for me. Like, can I have some parsley? Instead of just coming by and saying, listen, we need to have a conversation.
Pike was written in this episode to further the story and the conflict they needed. They were not trying to service Pike as a character.
Yeah.
He was more a plot device, which is unusual for a Star Trek episode to
Yeah, I
do that.
thought that was a shame, and I do think that had it been a two-parter, that's something they could have dug into a little more. I would have liked to have seen him wrestling with it more than just hoping that he could keep his idealism.
Yeah.
But I still think, despite the fact that I had a lot of that I found the second half slower and more difficult to get through, I do admire the ambition of the episode and how they took a big issue, a weighty issue, and even if I feel like it didn't get the full weight that the story deserved, I appreciate the effort of wanting to tell it and trying to do so.
The way I think this episode works, last week was fun and has rewatchability because it's fun. I think you brought something up earlier, which is this episode has rewatchability because it is thought provoking and it forces questions. And then when you watch it again, knowing certain things that happen, it gives you a whole new way to watch the episode. So that's why I feel like this is a strong episode, and I hope they continue to swing this way every once in a while to the dark and serious side. I have a feeling they're going to do it again for the season finale because you know who's coming, and
I know.
it rhymes with
Horn.
Horn.
Dorn. Dorn was better than Horn. Yes.
So,
No, and
which means
I am all for dark episodes and exploring those kinds of things.
I just want to recommend a book called Star Trek Discovery: The Empire War. If you really want to know the story of what Pike was up to, it's written by John Jackson Miller, and it tells you the story of Spock and Una, and and they had some intense, situation going on during the war of their own. They weren't just charting nebulas; they were doing something important, but they weren't in the war.
Just what I really loved when M'Benga was trying so hard to get Ra out of sickbay. I thought that was a particularly powerful scene where he's just like, please get out. Like he's almost begging him to go because he knows what he's going to be driven to do.
It almost felt to me like in a monster movie when someone's a werewolf, right? And they know that the full moon's coming. And they're like,
Yes.
you need to get out of this room now because I'm about to turn into,
Yeah.
and because he felt it. And you felt that come, there was the moment, the various moments. Christine noticed it early on when she starts talking to him and he's grabbing a tool. There are these little subtle things that Babs did. And she saw that you watched the physicality, which you brought up, during the dinner, the way he was clenching the table, he was such a wound up spring all episode. And he turned into that werewolf at that final moment.
Yeah.
Bad news for the Klingon.
Yeah. Well, good. Deserved it. Bad guy.
Although Uhura would disagree. She thought he was the coolest. He was hilarious.
Well, he fooled her. But yeah,
That's the thing. He didn't. I don't think he fooled her. I think he was lying, but he was also genuine. He's a complicated character. That's what I like about him. It's like he was a liar, but he was genuinely trying, and he really wanted. He knew that, he was ashamed of his cowardice and being a Klingon, and he knew that his only path was to be an accepted member of the Federation. He could never be a true Klingon in the Empire again.
I will just say I know that's what they wanted me to think.
Okay.
How's that?
That's excellent. Okay. I think we're kind of done, right?
I think we're done. I think we should do our bits of the week.
My bit is to point fans to a new documentary, which is being crowdfunded by our friend Mark Altman. It's called To Go Boldly, and it's celebrating the 60th anniversary of the beginning of production on Star Trek, which is coming up soon. It's going to be this documentary covering the whole franchise, looking at iconic locations. It's going to be the Trek-Experts guys and Star Trek celebrities. I might even show up in it.
Ooh.
I don't know. But I think
Can I
it's good.
request that if I contribute? Like, I'll only give you money if Tony shows up in it?
They are looking for 100,000. This is just launched, so I think they're only at about 12,000 now. But there'll be a link in the show notes. But if you follow the Treksperts, and we'll probably do a write up on this as well. It's called To Boldly Go, and it's on Kickstarter.
I'm sure we'll talk to them about it at some point too.
Yeah,
Yeah. All right. Well, so mine, I feel like enough time has passed that I'm allowed to mention the Delta Flyers again, right?
I don't know. Do we have a clock on that? Where
I think it's like once a quarter. And I
okay,
feel like I'm entitled.
okay,
So here we go. Because we're there in the home stretch. We're in the final few episodes. And they were doing the episode Homestead, which is where Neelix leaves the ship. So they had Ethan Phillips on. Even if you don't pay for the extras on the podcast, he's still there for the whole recap, which he seemed very enchanted by and kept saying, this is better than watching it. But the big key piece of information he gave that I thought was something new to me was that episode I'd forgotten was directed by LeVar Burton. And he said that while they were filming, LeVar's pal Lawrence Fishburne came by the Voyager set and hung out in Video Village for like a day or two. And they had a really good time together. I'm just trying to picture like Lawrence Fishburne hanging out on the Voyager set. It sounds, they were like, what? Oh my God. Like Robbie sort of did remember and Garrett didn't remember, but I just thought that was so cool.
they should have put him in a uniform in that lineup where you had everyone lined up
I
in the
know
corridor.
everyone was, well, I guess he wasn't there that day as my guess, because I think they would have, because there were crew people in that lineup. You know, there was every background extra that they ever had on the show was there. It was, and they talked about the emotion of that episode. They definitely got emotional talking about it. So it's a good one to listen to. And then I just want to tell people they did a bonus episode that is available to everybody about the strike. And it included Michelle Hurd, Armin Shimmerman, and Kitty Swink. And they all just really dug into the issues, primarily the SAG-AFTRA strike, a little bit on the Writers Guild strike, but available to all and well worth your time.
Yeah, that strike is ongoing, and apparently they're not even negotiating, with either side. So, getting back to the Star Trek of things, I am still wondering if they're going to, because apparently they are ready to shoot the Michelle Yeoh thing in October if they can, if the strikes are over. But who knows if they're going to be able to make that happen. I bet they're highly motivated to make that happen just because of her schedule.
Yeah. Well, she's not doing anything right now.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So before we go, we want to talk about Star Trek Las Vegas a little bit, because we are going to be there next week. So we are going to try to record a review of the musical episode to put up next week while we're in Vegas. But there won't be any news or anything else. And then is there anything, Tony, that we want to cover about Vegas before we go that we want people to know about? Like our panel, for example.
So we're doing a panel called The State of Star Trek, which we've done before. That's going to be at 11:30 in the DeForest Kelly Ballroom on Thursday. And it's going to be me and Laurie and Kayla and Brian and Matt.
Yay.
We will, cover all the issues we cover here on All Access Pod and more. And there'll probably be a lot of talk about physical media, because that's like physical media is having a moment again, for sure, for obvious reasons. So check that out, and we'll look for a preview. We're going to do a Las Vegas convention preview. I've talked to Gary Berman, about how things are looking, and it looks like it's going to be a good con. They're really, even though there's the strikes, there really haven't been a lot of cancellations, fewer than most years.
Well, fewer than that. The first year I went was the first post-COVID, not even post, because everyone was we were still in the throes of COVID, and there were just cancellations like the day of all of big names canceling the day of. I mean, what this one I think is allowing for is more of the production teams, like production designers and stuff like that, to have panels, which I'm excited about and glad that they're getting
but
more time.
The actors are going.
Yes.
The SAG rules will limit what they can say on stage. But you'll be able to do all the things you'll be able to see panels, you'll be able to buy autographs, you'll be able to do photo ops, you'll be able to cosplay, they're back at the Rio, which is a better location for them than the Bally's.
Bally's. Yep.
Bally's from last year. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all in Vegas and going to the convention. And we'll be covering it at TrekMovie.com all week. So when people do say interesting things on stage, we'll bring it to you both on our social media accounts
We'll
and
put it on X. Um,
yes, we'll
I'm
be
going to call it
Xing.
Twitter till the day I die. So, but we'll put it on Twitter. We'll put it everywhere. And also, if you are coming to the convention, we're co-sponsoring the landing party, which happens on the Wednesday night before the con at the Rio. And there are a lot of other events and fun things at night to go to. I'm just really looking forward to seeing all of you guys.
By the way, a few weeks ago you mentioned we're on Blue Sky, which no one is still on, but we are on Threads. We've been on Threads for a while. We've got over 6,000 followers. So if you are on Threads, check us out on Threads, and we, hope we'll be doing some threading from Vegas and some Xing.
Some Xing, some tweeting, some Xing, some threading, some blue skying, some Facebooking. We're there.
Check us out on MySpace.
Friendster. You can find us on Friendster.
All right, that's enough.
Until our next one, we're going to review it all in song. So we've been practicing.
I don't think my voice can handle that.
Listen, mine would be a disaster. Trust me, on my side too. All right, well, we'll see you next week.